What's happening, everybody? We have a very special episode of Cannabis Legalization News. Joining me here is Miggy. Miggy's enjoying something that's legal, right, dude?
This is a legal, legit gold. It's
legal, legit gold. Awesome.
Shatter, bubble hash, and flower.
Wow. Now, Rod, you're joining us from North Carolina?
Asheville, North Carolina, working from home today, as you can see, and happy to be here.
Yeah, and we're really stoked to have you because we have a lot to go over from the USDA's new regulatory framework that they've put out, and it's quite confusing. I mean, I think it's confusing. What did you think of it?
I think it's confusing and mostly wrong-headed. Well, I also want to bring in somebody real quick because something happened in New York, and this is my partner, Jeff Hall. Hey, Jeff practices criminal law. Yeah. I'm strictly business. And Rod, what type of practice do you have in North Carolina? I have a business law practice. We represent hemp and CBD companies throughout the country, and also have several clients internationally as well.
Awesome. Jeff, what about yourself?
Well, I represent clients in Illinois, mainly central Illinois, DUI, traffic stops, driver's license reinstatements, drug cases, cannabis cases.
Like bus, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Well, did you hear about this thing? I'm going to add this real quick. There was this massive bust that happened over in NYPD, and they're saying that it's hemp flower. Are you guys seeing more of this in your practice?
I am, sure. I know Jeff's going to talk to the criminal aspects, but as far as clients who are business clients who are transporting hemp across state lines or sometimes within state lines, we're seeing a lot of seizures throughout the country, unfortunately. And they're often accompanied by a criminal action.
Is there a state that you see in particular that's doing more so than others?
Well, the Midwest, there's a lot of traffic between Oregon and Colorado it's grown in Oregon and it's processed in Colorado. And those states in between, there have been several different seizures there. But really, it's happening in throughout the country.
Because those routes, I mean, that's a long like even for smuggling routes, like that's always been a highly covered, area, right? Where people look for out-of-state plates. They look for, guys traveling through.
Right. Well, we there was a time that where we actually wrote out, maps. We do opinion letters and we'd say, okay, we've got product from Oregon and we want to get to state X. And what's the best route? And before the 2018 Farm Bill, this was really important because a lot of states didn't have pilot programs. But after
that's something, I don't mean to cut you off there, but can we start to unpack this pilot program thing? Because there's discrepancies of THC levels on a nationwide basis, right?
Oh, there can be. Yeah. So we're talking about hemp. Just to be real brief, and I'm happy to dive into in depth, but to keep it up here for right now. Hemp first became legal in 2014 with the passage of the 2014 Farm Bill. The Congress allowed states to enact pilot programs for industrial hemp, and it said that THC levels, specifically Delta-9 THC levels, could not exceed 0.3%. And so when a state enacted a pilot program and hemp was grown in accordance with that program, and it had no more than 0.3% Delta-9 THC, that's lawful hemp. The problem was it wasn't lawful nationwide. Some states did not enact pilot programs. And in fact, a lot of them, a majority of them did enact them, but it was over a period of time. And so we would have to create routes through these states. Wow. The problem was this came up in light of the 2018 Farm Bill, which redid and redefined the whole, redefined hemp. It's 0.3% Delta-9 or less, but it also expressly made the cannabinoids, extracts, isomers, acids legal and legalized it at a federal level. Congress said that no state may prohibit the importation or the transportation of legal hemp through its borders. But that's the problem. We're seeing a lot of seizures, notwithstanding the federal law.
What is it? Because you just mentioned with the 2014 and then the change with the 2018, because in Illinois, we don't have a 2014 Farm Bill style rubric. The application was made by the state. There was no relationship with any type of higher learning education facility. Those types of hoops were kind of removed. So how is the state of Illinois operating if it's not pursuant to the 2014 Farm Bill?
Well, this is a big federalism question. So you have you have states that are enacting laws. I mean, states that are enacting recreational and medical marijuana laws, completely flaunting federal law. And so a state can presumably do the same with its hemp laws. It can say, well, here's our hemp program, and it may or may not dovetail with the federal program. Now, what the 2018 Farm Bill says is that it governs hemp unless a state actually proposes a plan to the USDA that is accepted by the USDA. So I think we're going to have some more, through 5 years from now, it's going to be a lot clearer than it is right now.
So I didn't know that it was legalized in 2014. First off, like people considered that the baseline of hemp legalization. I just thought, this is an experiment that just like when we have 8 federal patients, here's an experiment the government's going to do. I didn't realize that was going to be the baseline for legalization. When the states that didn't, Joe, does that mean they automatically elect out? Like they're not going to be? Because I mean, it's a program. It's a testing of a grow. So I mean, what's to stop people to grow in those illegal states? Because you're still going to have subject matter experts in illegal states. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that's all phasing out. So as of right now, there are only 3 states without any hemp laws whatsoever. They're Iowa, South Dakota, and Mississippi. And so the question, Tom's question is, so what about states that enacted hemp laws that were not pursuant to the 2014? They didn't tie it to an institution of higher learning. That issue has never been challenged, and frankly, I doubt that it ever will be. Now that we have the 2018 Farm Bill that really broadly expands and also gives a lot more detail about growing hemp. But you're right, Miggy. I think that hemp, in a weird way, has worked towards cannabis legalization as a whole. Because we've got the cannabis plant, and then you've got legal cannabis, and I'm talking about the federal level, which is hemp, and illegal cannabis at the federal level, which is marijuana. The only distinction is the THC levels, and so it makes governments, it makes people, it makes agencies more familiar with the plant. And
it would just occur to me that as we're talking about this, that you're talking about the statutes, the cannabinoids, THC, all this stuff, the properties of a fucking plant. Like you're talking about governing genetics at this point. No, isn't this something that we're crossing lines?
I don't know. What do you mean by that? Like, what are you referring to, governing genetics?
So we're saying to be known as hemp, you have to be 0.3% and not have a higher THC level. Now what total, right? Total 0.9 or no?
Yeah,
let's talk about that total, because let's say that you're a client that's got a hemp retail outlet that they're selling online. And if there's disparity amongst all the different THC levels for what constitutes hemp, whether you're using the 2014 Farm Bill or the 2018 Farm Bill, or in the state of Illinois, its own rules for the particular crop year that it had before, it looks like now it's going to have to substantially alter its procedures.
Yeah.
Where is it industrial hemp and where is it illegal marijuana?
Yeah. Well, good question. And fortunately, I can give a legal answer and I can give a practical answer. The legal answer is it's very clear. The statute is a production statute. These test results have to do with pre-harvest testing. So the product that's on the market right now, let's say you've got a beautiful hemp flower
lifter, yeah, something like that.
You've got some lifter, a special sauce. Right. And so you've got that, and it's very clear. It was grown according to by a registered processor. It was tested under the state. The state says, yes, it has less than 0.3% Delta 9. THCA is high. Let's say it's 1% even. But this is all legal under state law. It's legal under, it meets the definition of hemp in the federal law. But now we've got the USDA regulations to say, oh, no, it's total THC. Well, that applies to production that the USDA regulates, and it's not regulating any production now. So that hemp is lawful because it meets all the parameters.
That is the most hyper technical argument I've ever heard. It's not that 0.3 number is only to the things that is regulated by the USDA, and it's not regulating jack.
Right, but the issue being, who's to say that it's illegal? The USDA regulations do not say it's illegal because it regulates hemp production and pre-harvest testing. This has already been harvested. It was approved under law, under state and federal law. It meets the federal definition. So this is going to be a problem down the road. But from a practical standpoint, what I'm worried about is there's already a lot of confusion about this whole total THC question. Yeah. This is just going to add to that confusion. It's also going to, you can imagine law enforcement and prosecutors saying, well, even if it doesn't apply specifically, we now know the intent of Congress as to what they intended. So I am worried about it on a practical level for sure.
Well, what about, as as I was trying to more express how I'm trying to get to as far as talking about legalization nature, marijuana, hemp is the same plant. So at this point, marijuana is legal. Like it should be considered for everybody legal because we have hemp. Hemp is just like it's like the Roma tomato is a fucking weed. That's just a one portion of the same plant. So, couldn't technically we say marijuana is legal now?
I would love it if that was the case, but absolutely not. That's totally false and unfortunate.
But the 0.9 and all these percentages, all this description of the plant itself is, that's just like I said, the Roma tomato. We're identifying one portion of, like the low grade marijuana. That's very much what it is. It's not the weed you're going to take home and smoke. It's just, it's.
But how do you look at it at the THCA level then? Because that's something that I always kind of am amused by when I turn over my medical cannabis container and it shows a Delta 9 level of 0.2%, but a THCA level of like 27%.
Right.
Is that technically by the legal statutes that we have that merely state Delta 9, is that not, marijuana? Because the USDA regulation didn't apply to that, did it?
It depends. It depends if it was grown by, because right now in order to grow hemp, you have to be registered under a state program. If that was grown by a state approved cultivator and it passed the testing, which it should in a state that doesn't do the total THC piece, then that would be legal hemp. Admittedly, that's an extreme example and we don't see that, but that meets the definition.
But we're pretty much just tailoring just one portion of a plant. It just seems like a sad, arbitrary rule right now. I mean, we're almost there, guys. We're almost there where people can just say, this shit's legal. Get me out of jail now. Like, there's people spending time just for being in this, working with the fucking. I can't even think of another tomato. Like Roma's the one that stands out right now. Cherry tomatoes.
Well, I can actually give you an illustration of kind of how it happens in real life. I can't give too many specifics about the case because it's pending right now, but I'll say that the I-80 corridor in Illinois, it's the interstate that goes across from basically if you're coming from Nebraska or if you're coming from, California, Colorado, you're likely to take the I-80 corridor, and police up there, they regularly patrol, looking for out-of-state plates, rental cars. They pull up alongside next to the driver, look in the back, as they're driving. I mean, this is a huge thing. And the reason for that, they're hoping to find cannabis or, what's purported to be cannabis, because if it is Delta 9 THC cannabis, which is the illegal version of it, then they stand to reap a lot of money on drug fees, costs, assessments, things like that. But go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, can you explain about this monies?
Yeah.
So there is
let me give you an example.
Financial vested interest in the pulling over of people for cannabis.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so easy to smell. And even if they can't smell it, they say they smell it. And, they're, I smell cannabis. And then, no, you don't. No, you don't. And how are you to negate it without an inside source saying, the cop told me that he didn't smell it? I mean, there's really no way to negate it. And so anyway, an example of a case, police pull over an out-of-state SUV, oblivious, naive driver, who's my client, has the windows rolled down, and he's got 4 big totes in the back. Obviously, he's either moving out of his house or he's transporting legal hemp, I would say. And anyway, he's got all the certificates of analysis. He's got the invoicing. He's got everything. But the police pull him over for some, benign traffic offense. Speeding 3 over, 4 over, say he's following too closely, even though there's 3 car lengths in front of him, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so anyway, they pull him over and they're like, what's in the back? And he's like, legal hemp. And they're like, we'll be the judge of that. They didn't say that, but that's kind of what they're thinking. So
sure, buddy.
All right. So they call the company where he had the invoice from. They call the company. The company didn't answer because it's just guys starting out. And that's key though, because, and I'll preface it on this. Rarely in defense law, and I've been doing this 15 years. I was a prosecutor at the start of my career, and then I'm a defense attorney now. And anyway, we've never really had it where a defendant, their story tends to check out every step of the way. and my client says, this is hemp. I would have never done this if it was illegal. I was brought in because I needed money, and they said, here's a legal way to do it. Here are your certificates of analysis. Shoot, the guys even came in on the weekend to sell them the hemp load.
Yeah,
and so
price used to be high.
Yeah. And so anyway, he hands this over to police, and, police, they're so suspicious all the time. They say, oh, these are copies, photocopies. And when we called,
shit.
And I'm like, there's no original copy or notarized copy that you need to have. There's nothing, you just have to have the certificates. You have to have, it's good to have a letter from your attorney that you can hand. But this was this guy's first time. And if you met the guy, he's just so naive. And he's just not he's not like a mule for El Chapo, he's not doing that. And so anyway, they basically say, oh, this is suspicious. So what do? They arrest him. Guess what his bond was? $150,000. So $15,000 cash to get out. And
really?
so,
how much do you think that 106 pounds was for a bond in New York?
11 billion. You might as well make it, And so, sorry, my mouth's dry.
No, but see, again, this is why I'm going back to like weed's legal. If cops need to readjust their mindset, because all of these situations can be avoided. I mean, we have a FedEx employee that was on a rampage, right? I mean, an employee. Like FedEx, like, dude, you're not fucking saving anybody. You can get over this.
Some of my clients are getting impacted by trying to send this stuff through the mail. And then I would refer them to Rod, you did a nice piece on your website, and plug your website. If you guys need anything in hemp, please do Google hemp lawyer. You'll get his. And then you had an article about why you should use the United States Postal Service. But I've had problems with the Postal Service. I've had problems with UPS.
Well, let me comment on that, by the way. Sorry to interrupt, but sure. You want to use the U.S. Postal Service more so than FedEx or UPS, because in FedEx and UPS's policies, buried in there, say policy number 42,000A, it says, we reserve the right to inspect any package on the inside to look for a better address on the inside. And the only person I've ever known to do that was, a client's dad said, oh, I always put another address on there. You never know if it's going to get rubbed off. And I'm like, you're the only one I've ever, what? Because when I'm mailing stuff, I always put the good address on the inside of the package,
Right.
So anyway, like with USPS, the United States Postal Service, they need a warrant to search that. But a lot of times they get the dogs there on the conveyor belts and they're sniffing and stuff. But what UPS and FedEx do, they're private companies, so they just invite the police in. And I've had it where, like they had to play coy with me, but the police have hinted to me that there's a lot more there with regards to those agreements with companies like FedEx and UPS. So, I'm not mailing anything illegal, all right, but I don't want them looking in my packages. It could be my glamour shot photos from 1990, do I want
those were good photos? I've known Jeff.
You've seen him
basically my whole life.
But yeah, I mean, that makes more sense to use the Postal Service too, because even as a citizen, we can like help structure that government entity, right? This, initiatives and ballots and whatever the fuck we do to change a lot. I'm still wrapping my head around the whole bicameral process. I really don't appreciate that whole, like, I got to go through two bodies to make one
Did
rule.
you hear that in the news? I've already taken it down, but then the rumor mill out of the Senate is that the impeachment crisis is going to delay the vote on the Safe Banking Act, because now for some reason the Senate's got to care about something else.
Right. That's all crap. But without getting into the politics of it, to finish kind of that example for your viewers, this poor guy who doesn't have much money and has sick family, and that's why he was doing the run. He has to somehow find $15,000 to bond out. He has to somehow find money to hire a professional to be his voice, to basically explain this to prosecutors who are really smart, but they just don't know this stuff yet. And so I'm going into the prosecutor and saying, hey, this is going to be a learning experience for both of us because this is brand new stuff. But don't file a cannabis trafficking charge against him, because that's 12 to 60 years minimum, 12-year minimum, if you get caught bringing in cannabis into Illinois, 2,500 grams or more. with the intent to deliver. That's cannabis trafficking, and it's 12 to 60 years.
That
12 is
can't
the
be
minimum.
that different from other states, though. Even states where they've legalized it, haven't they legalized it like Illinois is, where they've legalized it to about that much? Miggy, can you have as much weed as you want in Seattle, or are there possession limits and stuff?
Yeah, I think it's like a pound, man. But you know, limits are fucking bullshit, anyways. Because if I was a sick
but
person,
they're enforcing that law out there.
yeah, no. If I was a sick person, though, I would need pounds to maintain a good quality of life, right? So the libertarian fucking Washington is about quality of life. If you can prove, and I think it's what America's about, right? If you can prove that this thing helps you, like Jeff, with your client, have they tested it? Did it test hot? Or what's the deal?
I'm getting there. I mean, it gets better.
Well,
I mean,
Rod has a lot of good stuff about testing.
The issues about the testing itself, right?
Well, so here I parade into the prosecutor's office, and by the way, this prosecutor is very reasonable. He's very understanding, and he didn't file a cannabis trafficking charge against my client. He filed a Class 1 possession charge, which is probationable, and he's been so reasonable. And I mean, he is actually a godsend for that county. I'm not just saying that because he may watch this. I'm not saying that at all. Okay, wink, wink. No. Anyway, it's just the fact that I go in and say, hey, how can you prove this isn't legal hemp? Because I've already talked to your lab technicians, and they can't prove it's legal hemp. In fact, I interviewed one of the guy that tested this, and he said if he were to take the stand, and I asked him the question, so after your GC test, your gas chromatogram test, or I think that's how you say it, after that, could you determine if this is THC, Delta 9 THC of under 3%? And he'd say no. And I'd say, can you determine if this sample taken from my client is legal hemp? Can you determine that? No, we can't. Can you determine that it's illegal Delta 9 THC cannabis? And he said no. And I said, so we don't know if this is legal or not, right? And that's reasonable doubt. But the problem I run into is if I have a mean prosecutor that's not as reasonable, then he'll say, go on, fight it all you want, but I'm going to upgrade it to a Class X, Super X, 12 to 60 year felony. So we're kind of just like saying, no, hold your horses. So I took it a step further and I said, well, now that you know this, how can you present the case to the grand jury without leaving this fact out? Because I'll move to strike the indictment because the case law says you can't mislead a jury.
Well, if you can't prove it's hemp or marijuana, you might as well just say it's a potato sack you fucking had. I mean, you can't fucking
exactly.
But the thing is, you can prove though. I mean, is it the lab's incompetence, or is it just? I mean, they can contract out, send it to a fucking Washington lab.
But they're not doing that, and I'm encouraging that. But I'm not trying to do all their work for them.
Yeah.
And I know exactly what they have to do, but I'm not going to say it on this podcast because I don't want to tip off them just yet because I have.
Come on, you see, in regular lawsuits, we have discovery and full disclosure requirements. But Rod, how are you helping your clients through these types of issues when you see this seizure?
Yeah. So it's tough. I mean, a lot of it is educational, and you're not only dealing with education with reasonable people, which is hard enough, these technical issues, all these, very often you're dealing with, and I think more often than not, unfortunately, with some law enforcement agencies I've dealt with, you're dealing with unreasonable people who have no desire to learn about it. They think your client is pulling the wool over their head, and they want to, and they might not even like the fact that hemp is legal. So they're gonna push back. And these are highly subtle issues. We talked about testing with the gas chromatograph. So the Delta 9 THC concentrations are what distinguish legal hemp from illegal marijuana. That's it, Delta 9 concentrations. But the problem is you use a gas chromatograph, it's commonly used. It's not a bad testing method in the abstract, but it's particularly bad with respect to this for testing cannabis because it heats up a sample in order to tease out the components or the compounds to measure them. And if anyone who likes and enjoys and knows about cannabis can attest, heating up a sample of cannabis will decarboxylate the THCA into Delta 9. And so
I have noticed that my joint's much more effective when I light
it's a little more effective, but it's literally creating the molecule that it's measuring. I mean, it's like, let's have a radar gun that speeds up the car it's testing. I mean, it doesn't make any
that's
sense.
a good analogy. I like that.
Yeah. But again, I mean, it's all arguable, right? How testing methodology. I mean, even here in Washington, my biggest gripe of even saying something is any percentage level is there's no standardization. There's no one way to do a thing and say that's the way that we're going to reference. That's the way,
Yeah. Even really high-end lab equipments and ISO certified laboratories have measures of uncertainty, which the USDA regulations take into account. So there's a measure of uncertainty issue. You can use HPLC, high performance liquid chromatography, which does not decarboxylate the Delta 9, but most state crime labs don't have that. It's just
that's what we're running into. They need HPLC testing. That's the quick fix.
Right.
And I've spoken to lab technicians about it, and they're like, "No, I do the color test. I always what is it? The DeCoin something? It's where it registers purple." And then so he did that, and then he did the GC test, and he then explained, because he did say this as part of the test. He said, He's like, "I'll tell you this. And it helps your case. I think when I tested your sample, I had much higher ticks." You know, the TIC, what is it? The tick marks. Mm-hmm. He said, it's like tachyon something. But anyway, he said, I had so many more for CBD than I did for Delta 9. So I had 10 to 12 million parts CBD and then maybe 1 million parts Delta 9. And he said, so there's that big discrepancy, but he can't quant it out. It's not a quantitative.
Say what the percentage is. What do you say about probable cause in situations like that? Because it's an issue not only in hemp states, but even in recreational marijuana states like Miggy's state of Washington. Mm-hmm. There still exists unlawful marijuana, right? And right. So, but probable cause is an issue. The odor of marijuana, the presence of what looks like marijuana, mm-hmm. is not probable cause anymore that a crime may be committed. What are you seeing with that, Jim?
That's what I'm dealing with right now. And see, all this is new because now we're starting to get the hemp loads. Before it was just Delta 9. And, right. You know, I mean, there it was. So you couldn't really say, go ahead and test it there, Bubba. You know, go ahead and test it.
But you're also driving a huge bunch of female flowering tops to the cannabis plant. That has only been one thing until a few years ago.
Well, and here's the thing. Exactly. And I've been researching it as far as the PC aspect. I'm glad you brought it up because on the one side, police are going to say, well, since we don't have the testing to differentiate, if we field test positive, that's within our rules to confiscate because that's probable cause. But then we say, well, what if they have all the documentation, the certificates of analysis, the invoicing, the letter from the attorney, make some calls roadside. They'd say, nope, we're just going to take it in because why? They get the money to bond out. The sheriff in Illinois gets 10% of the bond money. So the sheriff got $1,500 of that and we won't get it back. I went to the prosecutor.
Getting paid.
Yeah, and I went to the prosecutor and I said, honestly, everything is coming back. I've confirmed the COAs from the company. They said that they tested them and that's accurate. I confirmed with the company that sold him the hemp with their lawyer, and their lawyer said they better not be selling Delta 9 because they only have a hemp license and we're trying for their cannabis license. So I went to him with all this and I said, it may be strange to hear this, but it's the first time I'm saying it, but I'm going to need that stash back.
Yeah.
Because you've interfered with interstate commerce and they're going to need to complete the delivery and we're going to need the bond money back. I mean, I don't think you can prove your case, but with prosecutors, they love their cases and they hate it when they have to give back money. I used to be one and I remember that mentality.
Yeah. I used to be a litigator. You want to win, damn it.
Yeah. But you have this hope that you guys would do this for like justice and the American way.
No,
well, I get it. You're doing it for a paycheck, and this is part of the problem with like how none of this shit's legal. How it even matters with like the I-80. I got pulled over in Wyoming driving through. I literally had the cop. I was on cruise control. Just got done smoking, whatever. But guy pulled up beside me, then pulled behind me. I have out-of-state plates. I'm fucking dark skinned, and so he lit me up. He saw the shake in the console. He asked if that was marijuana. I try to be cordial with cops because here's the thing, kids. If you don't want to get shot, you fucking just be like, yes, sir, ma'am. And everybody talks a lot of shit until that moment happens. So like this guy had me in the back of the car. So mind you, I'm on the road as a technician. I have a car full of weights, signal generators, all his RF equipment. My beard was longer, so I looked like Al Qaeda. Matter of fact, that was a thing at the time too.
You were wearing one of those hats too, right? Keep you warm.
Yeah,
and the turban.
Motherfucker, he went through my luggage and shit, and I have all these magazines and stuff, and I'm in the back of the car freaking out. And then he's like, why do you have all this magazines? I'm like, I'm just a connoisseur. And he's like, are you a grower? You can tell me. I'm like, what? We're cool now? Like, you have me in the back of the car handcuffed in this hard ass plastic seat. I'm fucking shitting bricks because it's a company truck too, by the way. And I'm like, all right, my technical life's over. Like, I'm going to jail over some bullshit Monday morning weed and racist cops or whatever in Wyoming. And fucking, it's just unfortunate. He realized he didn't have a big fish. And I think that's the thing where people like Jeff's client who are getting fucked, livelihood, the goods that the people took, the time in jail, he's losing money. And just the same way with patients, people who are actually just trying to grow it for themselves. There's too much authority in the police's hands right now because of this shit. Until we establish now the testing thing, like your client should be able to get off by just proving if they allow that lab testing, that way you can have that proof.
Trial right? I mean, isn't that what
or access
out
to
the amendments, Jeff? You're a better constitutional lawyer than me. I just care about contracts.
The components of the plant change too. That's another thing that we need to consider. Like, I mean, even if he got caught with hot hemp, it could have degraded, or if it was good cannabis, it could have degraded into hemp at one point. So I think it's in everybody's best interest just to test it right away, because these guys are holding on to it, right, Jeff? There's no access. They're not. Is it being contained in a good environment? Is it going to get moldy?
Hey, Miggy, that's a good question. I can say, and I hate to interrupt Jeff, but I had a seizure in Wyoming. I understand that mentality you faced, and this was for a truckload of hemp. And they didn't take their time. They took their time to test it. In fact, there wasn't a test lab, at least at the time in Wyoming. They did not store it, to your point, in good conditions. They just stored it in some warehouse. So it was degrading. And then one little piece about the testing is that, let's say it's HPLC, and let's say everything matches up. The plant is a plant. It's an organic compound. So one sample might test differently than the other sample. And so there may be pieces of the whole that would be slightly over 0.3. There's going to be pieces of the whole that test way below 0.3. What is this, an average of the whole load? Do they have to tease out every little bit that's above 0.3? I mean, these are all totally unanswered questions.
Yeah.
And in the Wyoming case, they actually, even though it was it was hemp completely, but with their testing, they decided that a tote or two was hot, and they kept that back and gave us the rest. They didn't press charges. It's miserable, the number of issues that are being raised by this.
Yeah. Well, what about that? Because you said, all right, you have that problem with the hemp testing hot and coming in. Oh man, I totally spaced on that. I was waiting to ask that question.
Are you smoking what I'm smoking?
And I missed it. No, I'm not. That's the thing. I was just trying to keep my my thoughts in order.
Tom's spacing out at 12:30 Friday. I mean, like what? And I've known Tom. I think I've known him for
this life is kind of a
like
drag. But that's what I wanted to talk about, was probably like the USDA regulations when it comes to that hemp that does exceed the 0.5% threshold or the 0.3% total THC threshold, and then its destruction characteristics. And then it's also its triggering of it being marijuana. How does that get enforced? And what did you think about the USDA's regulatory for having no remediation to hemp? Yeah,
no. Well, it's bad in a number of ways. So it's bad, because it only allows a 15-day window from testing to harvest, which is not, it just doesn't work. There's log jams right now. It's 30, sometimes 45 days to harvest when everyone's moving. So that's too short of a window. It doesn't allow for any remediation. And then it says, well, you're only negligent if your total THC is above 0.3 and no more than 0.5, which implies that maybe you're willful or even criminal if your hemp is
willful or criminal if you go over 0.5. But I remembered what I was going to ask, and that's talk about the testing methodology that the USDA regulations require for the tops of the female plant.
Right. They require the tops are the most trichome rich. That's where you're going to have the highest concentrations of Delta-9. But we're talking about a plant that could be used for any number of things. Smoking. It could be used for extracts. It could be used for fibers. And so you need to take a full.
Where does this 0.3% come from? Have you heard the origin story of 0.3?
Yeah, it's from a book, and literally the author of the book said that 0.3, the distinction between hemp and marijuana, had to be drawn somewhere on the spectrum, and 0.3 was just literally arbitrary. Bam.
That's literally arbitrary testing, not the female flowering tops, but the leaves.
The leaves. That's a good point. And the European Union chose 0.2. Some countries choose 0. Switzerland is 1. I mean, if
we look at the genetics of the plant, it's the 20-to-1 ratio. why don't we regulate it by a ratio as opposed to by a particular sand number that's creating all this bullshit?
Tom, too smart.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
they don't like
That's what happens
ratios.
these
They
days
like
now.
they operate in binary. You know, it's either black or it's white. It needs to have a number, just like 0.08 doesn't necessarily have any scientific
20 to
correlation
1
to
ratio.
everyone.
A lot of the hemp has a 20 to 1 ratio, and you can have genetics that are stable for that.
And just like our THC level for Delta 9 THC for DUI. So I spent 4 years working on that bill, started it in 2012, got vetoed by the Republican Governor Rauner because we had 15 nanograms per milliliter in whole blood for your THC level. And we were not pushing for THC levels like 0.08. We wanted impairment-based prosecutions, but the prosecutors and police, they want their fine line. They want their, you're at a limit. And so they pull it out of their ass. And so what they did was we put 15 in the first bill, and then NHTSA came out with a study that said that confirmed our number 15 was in their study, and I still have a lot of questions about it and problems with it, but they concluded that 15 nanograms per milliliter of whole blood of THC is equivalent. It showed similar signs of impairment at when someone was at 0.075 and 0.08 for BAC. But what did we do? Well, Governor Rauner redlined my bill. He crossed out 15 and wrote 5. Because that was a number that everyone got happy with before. Nevada, it's 2. California, it's 5. I think up in correct me if I'm wrong. If you find out later, in Washington, it's 5.
It's 5.
But and that is equivalent in that study done by NHTSA. The study done by them, the government, said that 5 nanograms per milliliter is equal to, and showed similar signs of impairment for people with alcohol content of 0.025. And under our law in Illinois, you're at 0.025, you're presumed sober. So we pulled a number out of our ass. And that's what we keep doing. And we keep trying to educate.
Arbitrary. I believe the technical term for when all this kerfluffle started back in 1976 and they wrote a paper was arbitrarily picked.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's even worse than that. You know,
you're talking about due process rights for
like
locking people up and taking their life away. Arbitrary number.
Well, let's destroy your life because of a number that we pulled out of our ass. And by the way, you could have been over just barely, but now you're not. So now you got to go to prison for 6 years because you had THC in your system and someone died because they went off the road after you swerved to miss them.
Oh yeah.
You see? It's ridiculous. I get angry about it. So just
the low nanogram value, it's a setup for fucking you're guilty because you were high at that moment or whatever. Because even if I wasn't smoking, I'd still be over 5 nanograms in 12 hours.
You'd be at it probably at all times, and that's what we were trying to say. And that's when I went to the Senate Criminal Committee in Illinois, the House Criminal Committee. I spoke to them, and all of them sat back. They all sat back in their chairs, and they're like, something needs to be done. I just don't know what the proper mechanism's going to be. And not to make it political, but we had a bunch of Republicans that were all like, no, no, no. And they threatened to kill the bill unless we lowered it. And we fought back, but we didn't want to kill decriminalization back in 2015 or 2016. We didn't have a veto-proof majority, so we had to adopt the changes so it didn't kill decriminalization because it was attached to the bill.
That was the argument against our legalization here was because of 5 nanograms. But the other argument is you just want to get your foot in the door, because the fallout is I haven't really heard of any scenarios where, it's pretty much your setup, right? You're going to be set up as a victim. But back to arbitrary, because Rod had an article where he highlighted some of the USDA rules. And I just think it's funny. It says, labs, the mu, the uncertainty. So what if your lab had like a 2% uncertainty? I mean, what is uncertainty? It comes down. That's a very questionable mathematical fucking like human error type shit. You can say, as a technician, you got to add 10% because that guy is just, going to come in from a bad day and, maybe he's tired.
About methodology of proof. I mean, proof each pound is hemp.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a good.
Has a 30.
Go ahead, Rod.
Well, I mean, states are beginning to say, well, this is what constitutes a lot. It's 30 pounds or it's whatever it is. And so, fortunately, it's not gram by gram, but 30 pounds when you're doing a lot of business is not a lot. And you have expensive testing protocols, sometimes costing hundreds of dollars. And if you're tons of pounds and you're going to test every 30 of them with a full panel COA, that's hardcore regulatory overreach.
But even with that, like, so what is it like? If it, with the 0.03 whatever percent, if your lab was fucking had a 10% mu, I mean, you can kind of work your way towards that argument. The thing is, only labs who are willing to have shitty measurements are going to be like, because it's just America, baby. We throw money at all kinds of shit. I've seen all kinds of
technology proof, though. It's weight, and it's if the stuff is what it is. I mean, so think about it from that. Like, what are they going to have to prove every gram is over the line?
Yeah. I think that's going to be tough. And with these, I think I love Miggy's argument. I think the deal is there are standards, for a lab to be ISO certified. And unfortunately, I think the mu is going to have to be pretty tight in order for them to meet other regulatory requirements. So it's tough.
You would think it would be. See, I work in my lab but I work in electronics, right? My lab is ISO certified, but it always comes down to the equipment. So test equipment's your one factor, and that's the end to the actual value. But then you have the other argument, because it's all super nerd shit. Like some things are fundamentally like a pound's a pound and all this other stuff. But then you have to say, okay, like the new 1 gram. The new 1 gram is not a value, a physical thing. It's like a laser type light mathematical formula. And they've been arguing, I think, for past 8 years still now about the new, like the 8th digit of it. Like there's people that focus on the actual substance of things. But then you have the guys who don't give a fuck and are willing to say, I want to say the human value is a bad measurement. You're incorporating error.
I'm not following. But
human error is in
the next, but I wanted to turn this to the future. So where do we think the USDA's rules are going to meet out onto the CBD hemp industry, both from the commerce perspective and then also in the streets in its enforcement perspective?
Yeah, well, I think on the commerce perspective, if the rules are, if the current rules are adopted as the permanent final rule, well, it's going to do a few things. I think it's going to drive a lot of farmers out. It's going to raise the cost of the inputs, meaning into manufactured products, meaning the hemp and the extract and the isolates and whatnot. And also, it's going to put the U.S. at a competitive disadvantage with the world, because these are very onerous requirements. With a lot of, not a whole lot of room for error, with some pretty bad consequences if you go over that. Other countries don't have this, and so what we may see is that other countries are growing the hemp, other countries are producing the extracts and the isolates, and other countries are formulating the products that come back into the United States. So I think from a policy standpoint, the USDA regs are horrible.
What about from the testing? Talk about how the testing may delay the process and gum it up as well.
It's a great point. The testing is, we already have log jams and major holdups because we don't have enough sufficient analytical labs to test the hemp. People will send in a sample and it'll come back weeks later because they're so full. Well, now what we're doing is we're requiring these same labs to have a DEA license, which has it's going to be difficult to get. It's going to cause its own log jams over there. But we're pulling labs out of the system. And we're making it harder for labs to enter the system. So it's like we're crowded on an 8-lane superhighway, and in order to fix the problem, we're going to reduce it down to 3 lanes. Like it's
I have to go in and out of Chicago more than I would prefer. That never works. That just creates just a pile of cars that are a parking lot for months. Yeah.
Do you think that the safe money is going to be like we were talking with Yorkshire Farms or York Farms about
Farm from Virginia? We had another YouTuber on that had a harvest come in, and he did a very viral video on the USDA regs as they were coming. And so we talked to a farmer about what's the day to day? What are you worried about? All those types of things. It was fascinating.
Yeah, and I mean with the whole when the rules keep changing, what about just taking the isolate, what is it, vertical, where you grow and then
they call that that's the difference between full and broad spectrum. So you're just trying to drop out all the THC, right?
Right. But the problem is that what we're talking about with the testing, USDA doesn't have rules for post-harvest testing. This is all pre-harvest, and so by definition, you're testing a plant that's in the ground, and it's pre-pulling out any of the THC.
So it's before you chop it.
Yep, exactly. Before you pull it out and chop it.
So with those testing things that they have, the new requirements, is that mandatory testing before you chop it?
Mandatory testing, absolutely.
See, Illinois is on the honor system. It's pervasive. I mean, like it's permissive. So provided that you don't, flout the law and flagrantly like try to grow legit cannabis or THC cannabis, you can just operate. So because the state's busy enough.
That's going to change over the next year or two once these USDA regulations are fully implemented.
That's going to cost the state of Illinois a lot more in compliance costs.
Oh, the state of Illinois a lot more. And who's going to fund this? The farmers are going to fund it, or the higher taxes. It's a lot of these states are resource deficient anyway, and then we're going to add more burdens to them. It's
like in Jeff's client case. I mean, the fact that he has to pay for testing, like they're pulling over this guy, ruining his day, and he's got to come out of pocket to prove the guilt or innocence. They should have to prove guilt.
They do, right, Jeff? Don't they have to prove?
I totally missed that because I'm trying to do work.
Oh, you're good, man.
I'm not high. All right.
He's multitasking.
Don't worry, I got it.
So, like, what does this do with the burden of proof? And can you explain the burden of proof when it comes to these cannabis cases?
Well, and that's the interesting thing now, because it's like I want to walk into every prosecutor who's prosecuting a regular cannabis case and say, okay, let's set it for trial, and then I want to put the technician on the stand and just say, did you test could this be legal hemp? And they say, yeah, it could be legal hemp. And then we win the case, but the prosecutor has to know about it. And if they don't know, am I tipping them off by telling them this now? So if they watch this, you know what I mean?
But how could they insulate themselves from it?
Well, right. What they'd have to do to insulate it, I mean, I kind of don't want to say it because I don't want to tip them off. They need to figure that stuff out.
Brad is right, though, right? Like, I mean, like, it's not tipping off. If that person is listening to this now, he should be like, hey, maybe I'm an asshole. Maybe I shouldn't.
All the time.
But I'm just saying, like, this guy's like, I'm wasting people's time. Literally, I am protecting and saving no one. Like, I've helped nobody today. And matter of fact, I made a guy who was just trying to feed his kids and just do a thing. And I mean, that's the problem. We give too much power to the system over some bullshit. Like,
but think about it. Think about who we're dealing with, the mentality. You have to change hearts and minds about it. And my heart and mind, I used to prosecute cannabis cases. And I'll tell you what, I didn't feel good about it, but I had directives from my higher ups that I had to do certain things. But jail was usually the last option because nobody wants to jail anybody for cannabis, but some prosecutors actually do, unfortunately. And so you have to change hearts and minds. So going in and doing the Peter Griffin when you're just saying, come on, it's just cannabis, come on.
Yeah, but, no, it's hard though.
It falls on deaf ears because prosecutors are like, it's still against the law. And then they've never tried it, or they don't like it, or, it made them sick after they smoked it when they were drunk first. And I've had that conversation before where I'm like, you're not supposed to
know why that is
first.
Because that's happened to me.
You're not supposed to get drunk first. You're supposed to, smoke and then drink.
Well, why is that?
You'll drink less. You'll drink less, and it'll complement your butt.
The next day, it's great. Yeah.
And so, look, at age 30 is when I started smoking more regularly for my health, because I had I didn't think I'd get personal for the internet today, but anyway,
tell everybody in real time, live.
Yeah. Put it on my face and my face alone on this part. So anyway, I had a prescription for Ambien CR, and I was sleepwalking in my building. In this building, I had a condo upstairs that I lived in at the time, and it alarmed me. And so I wanted to get off Ambien CR, but what are the options? Well, one, you have to wean off of it because your body is so screwed up. It doesn't produce, melanin, or not melanin. What is it?
Melatonin.
Melatonin. Sorry, melanin. I got enough of that right now, but
not me.
Anyway, but melatonin, so I couldn't produce it to help me sleep. You have to break that cycle. But with cannabis, you could just do a quick little puff and go right back to bed. And the other thing that it did for me was it made me stop thinking about my clients' cases. It trained my brain to say, look, that stuff's going to be there tomorrow. It's over there. You compartmentalize it for tonight. And I've tried to tell this to more people, and I haven't said this part at CLEs, continuing legal education seminars, but a part of me wants to, and I may do it after the first of the year. when it's legal here, because I think the more that people see professional people that use it responsibly, it's not like the Spakowski, stereotype from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. There are more people than you would even like, not you guys, but there are more people than you'd imagine that
cannabis lawyers
that smoke.
and activists.
I mean,
But it would be $1 billion industry if it wasn't, though. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing, like smoking high. Like, sure, I wander off and dialogue a little bit, but you know what?
It's not a gateway drug. Alcohol, if anything, is the gateway. I mean, it's the gateway to a lot of stuff if you think about it. But people are so dead set on that stereotype, and we have to break that mold. And that's why I'm starting to be more vocal about it. I'm vocal about it on Facebook. I get jokes from judges and prosecutors, and I'm like, hey, whenever you want to smoke up, let's do this. You don't even have to smoke. I'll eat an edible with you. We'll just toast it and then eat it. I mean, it's like they need to see that responsible people use it. And so that stoner mentality, we need to be representatives and ambassadors of it, to not have all those stereotypes where you're slurring or you're like, dude, yeah. I mean, I could be high right now and nobody would know. I mean, they'd probably think it was Adderall, but no. But anyway.
I mean, there's a body level, there's a mental level. I mean, like sometimes you get a little much, but that's the worst thing that happens. You get a little anxiety. I mean, that's
a little bit of anxiety. Yeah. And so anyway, I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir, and all your viewers here, probably know exactly what I'm talking about. They've heard it before, but I'm trying on the professional end, on the law, the legal end. And you'd be surprised at the representatives that smoke or use cannabis. And honestly, I want them all to use cannabis because it'd chill them the fuck out, to be quite honest. Could you imagine where they just sit down and smoke? Could you imagine the deals that they would work out, the meeting in the middle?
Well, it's about priorities too. So like my old lady gets mad at me for doing everything I do, like just for being a man, right? But it's the weed shit that really pisses them off, because I focus on this as a thing that my friends are get tired of like the activism side of things, and I was like, yeah, well, I am too, but because my thing is writing, that's my passion. So it's like, if people just stop getting arrested, I can stop fucking writing about this shit, because I'm just tired of there's lots of good weed stories, but there's more horror stories, and it does so much good better than bad. So I mean, we're so close. Washington State is thriving. I mean, we have shitty fucking voters. We have shitty money management. We've wasted so much money, but there's billions just surrounding me right now. It's ridiculous.
One thing that they were doing, and sorry to cut in, Tom, but one thing that they were doing was they were taking Colorado and they were cherry picking data, and they were putting it out as propaganda, saying that accidents increased by 50%. But you're like, okay, all right, so that's a real number. Let's see what you're looking at. And when you look at it, and you look at each of the accidents, most every one of those where there were accidents, there was alcohol that was the superseding factor. Yeah. They just tested positive for THC.
Yeah.
And so then they blame it on THC, even though it was the alcohol, because they were at 0.12, but you didn't mention that. So what I do is I call them out and I'm vocal about it. I say, why are you cherry picking data? That is akin to lying. Why are you lying to us? It's fear. Why are you trying to inject fear? We're trying to get to the truth.
Well,
we're trying to, get us to just stay scared of it,
When they legalized gay marriage, there were also more.
Good segue.
There were more married gay men in accidents too. Right after that, I'm just saying, it's not a freaking thing. If we can just make it legal, then we can just put priorities, and that's what it comes down to. Our judicial priorities, our cops, our police's priority. I mean, Seattle Hemp Fest, Tom can tell you, it's amazing.
I can't wait till next year. But Rod, what's your cannabis story? Because I read a post that you had done about how you had become a cannabis lawyer, and it was really, really inspiring as well.
Well, thanks, Tom. Jeff, this is I'll share some personal stuff this time. This is I've smoked.
Pot. I got a couch. No, I'm just kidding.
I've smoked pot off and on my whole life, and in my 30s, I got testicular cancer, And even though I had smoked pot before, even though I had read, this is about 10 years ago, that it could help with chemotherapy, that marijuana could, I chosen not to use it for chemotherapy for the first part of it, because I thought, well, that's really just a cheap excuse to get high. I wasn't totally sold on the medical marijuana piece. I thought it should be legal just on civil liberties grounds. But one day I'd had a chemo treatment and I was feeling really bad. And after laying in bed all day and not having anything better to do, not being able to sleep, I went downstairs. My brother was there checking on me, and he had some weed. And so we smoked, and I frankly didn't expect it to do anything. And not only did it do something, but it did something that was so powerful that it changed my life. I mean, not to be that cheesy about it, but truly it changed my career.
But you hear like this is a refrain. And so like when you're in the movement, this is a refrain that you hear from Jeff, from Rod, from me, from Miggy. And like it's amazing that refrain still is operating under this guise and cloak of darkness and prejudice.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
It's like, this is medicine, and this needs to be legal for more than just, intellectual, principles. It needs to be legal because people need it. I need it.
Yeah.
But then think about knowing what you know now, and then thinking about all the prisoners of war that are in jail right now, or that have had the power of law, the full extent, all those felonies that Jeff was talking about earlier, that weight just put over their heads with their families.
Well, read Smoke Signals by Martin Lee. Read that. I mean, there's a great, he did a great summary of all these different people that are still being pursued by the federal government. It's beyond me, but I will say this, that people are starting to come around, and I'll use my mom as an example. She'd never, ever smoke, right? She drink some wine here and there, but she's very health conscious. And all of a sudden, she's starting to use CBD, at least, to help. And I'm like, well, Mom, that's like, you're halfway there, you're halfway there, it's making you feel better, right? Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And so there's this wave, and it's like, well, it can make you feel even better and not mess you up, not impair you. You just have to get the right dosage. You have to get, was it sativa that works best for you? Is it indica? Is it a hybrid? What is it? And I said, imagine you can walk into a liquor store and say, clerk, I want to feel less anxiety. I would like to not have beer goggles. I would like to not have a hangover tomorrow. And I would like blood to flow to where it needs to flow. And they say, hey, we got the perfect thing. It's called Patron. Just get over here, man. And wouldn't that be nice if people could see that they can actually walk into a store and say that exact thing, and that the bud tenders would know how to accommodate? And that's why I'm just trying to get the word out to say, it's not like this sketchy place you walk into and there's, this creepy person behind the
crack house.
Yeah, they're like, hey,
crack.
I mean, it's like normal people, and they're so nice, So anyway,
You guys have dispensaries though now, right?
What's that?
You guys have dispensaries?
Yeah, we do. And hey, look, the second I had my medical cannabis card, it was like the 5th best day of my life. Yeah. I walked in that thing and I was like, taking selfies, and I was just like, they have no cameras allowed, but I'm like, I'm just so happy. I'm going to memorialize this day. This is the best day. So anyway, sorry, I get animated about this.
It's all right. But we've been going for about an hour, so I just want to leave it with some, what we believe our next steps are going to be in this industry. So how do you, Rod, how do you see the future shaping up?
I think it's, in the big picture, we're moving in a positive and progressive direction. The attitudes are changing fast in the United States. We're seeing changes in South America. We're beginning to see the ice begin to defreeze, to crack a little bit in Europe and Southeast Asia. So globally, cannabis is becoming more and more of a thing. And I think we're going to continue that direction. But I think we're going to have a lot of obstacles. We're going to have obstacles regulatory, and all these things we've been talking about, testing and licensing and that kind of thing. We're also going to see obstacles in the market. The CBD thing is building up fast. At some point, that bubble is going to pop, and how much it corrects and when and how is going to be an issue. But we're going to see, I think, a lot of these different bubbles and pop along the way. But in the big picture, we're moving in a positive place for sure.
Yeah, I could think that's coming, because I saw that USDA regulation. And how many farmers do you think are going to be knocked out of the industry?
It's hard to put a number to it, but I'll just say a significant number. I mean,
Right.
whether because they can't keep up because of the being priced out, or because they don't want to keep up because it's just too risky, too much and too risky.
Well, the other smart money could be just go to the fiber if you're going to be staying hemp. I mean,
There's no infrastructure. There's nowhere to sell it.
Well, that's the problem.
Definitely.
Fiber's the future, but all these same rules apply, and you can assume that some phenol strain is not going to be high in THC, but you still got to deal with all these issues. You still got to be subject to signing away a lot of your rights to the DEA, and in order to participate, it's even though you're just growing for fiber. So, fiber is great and a good future, but we got to fix some of these problems before.
Jeff, what do you think about the practical side from the prosecution defense angle over the next couple of years?
I just think learning, because right now I don't have a test case that has seen its way all the way through. I just don't have that yet. Working on it, but what I see happening is that we'll have to have a legislative solution to this hemp thing. We're going to have to get HPLC testing into these state crime labs. We're going to have a system set up to where defense attorneys can send to their own, private, which I could do that. But honestly, my client can't afford to do that. And that's the issue. They took all his money that he ever had in bond, and they're holding it, and they don't, and a part of me believes they don't want to release it, but I'm going to fight to get it back. But I see, as the feds update their laws, I see each state fucking it up in one way or the other in their own law. And I would say that some states would probably be better than others. And then we'll start to form our laws for what works and what doesn't work. And that's why I'm trying to meet with legislators, talk to them about potential changes, things like that. I'm talking to prosecutors. I've gone into various states' attorneys around where I live, telling them, look, this is a problem. And think about it, though. It could be a much bigger problem than they're realizing. Because let's say there's a big hemp load. It's a huge load, and they've got a big U-Haul truck. And on every bit around on the inside is all hemp. But then there's a big container full of Delta-9 THC on the inside. That's going to slip through. Are they going to inspect every tote, every bag? Because think about it, it's a good way to hide your Delta-9 THC cannabis. And also, it can be hemp, but then convert through decarboxylation to illegal Delta-9 THC cannabis. And so we need to fine tune this stuff. And I think we need to add THCA, like the ratio that you're talking about. I don't think that what was it? Did you say the proposed rule was combined at 3%?
Yeah, total THC 0.3.
I mean,
the flowering tops.
Isn't that everything? Like
0.3.
Yeah. So anyway, I see us slowly moving, but as we start to educate, legislators will get wind. But you have to deal with the politics of it. That's the other factor or variable that goes into it.
Do you guys think there'll be future lawsuits for like your client? This product that they have and they're not storing right. I mean, eventually it's just garbage.
It's difficult because to sue the police, let's say, you have to show willful and wanton behavior. And the police, if I was defending them, I'd say, look, they don't know. They're not scientists. They're not lab technicians. And they don't have the capability at this time to test this stuff. They were just following state police rules and protocols. And it's better to get the product off the street than it is to keep it on and let it proceed forward in case it is actually illegal, you see? And so I don't see any successful civil suits unless the police know it's hemp, they've confirmed it's hemp, and they still take it, because then that could be the federal violation.
I'm gonna update and then what I see before I ask Miggy how things are going is that there's going to be continued regulatory weird stuff that's coming, and it's probably going to get worse in the state of Illinois, which was wide open this year. But then I'm going to start placing into my systems these types of tripwires to alert the law enforcement officers as soon as possible regarding the lawful nature of my client's action.
Sure. Letters and all the manifests and documents, and maybe even calling them down the road. We got a truckload coming through. You just know.
And let me just show you this, and sorry to interrupt here again, but I just came from court. And I'm going to cover the top part of it because that's got the client's information. But this is a true bill of indictment, okay? And look at the sentencing range right there. Hold on, I'll get it.
It's public record.
Yeah, it's public record. So it's like, sorry.
6. Hang on, I'm gonna blow
Can
you
you
up.
see it?
There you go. 12.
12 to 60 years.
60.
Oh my God.
Cannabis
Struggle
trafficking.
is real. I mean, and I just wanted to thank everybody, especially Rod and Jeff, for coming. Jeff, how do people get in touch with you, man?
Well, they can call 309-699-4691. They can look me up on the internet, Jeff Hall, Attorney, Illinois. They'll find a lot of stuff about me on there.
How about you, Rod?
Sure. They can call 828-255-9881. Email me, rod@kitelaw.com. That's KIGHTLAW.com. And check out my blog. It's at cannabusiness.law.
Yeah, I love that blog. And Miggy, I got good news for you, man.
Hey, bro.
CannabisLegalizationNews.com is going to be in beta, so I'm going to get you a login so that you could start doing some writing and have a platform that we could share those on that. Weed Weekly. Nice.
I got my homegrown article.
All right.
Yeah, and also I forgot about my blog. So it's hallrustum.blogspot.com.
Cool.
All righty.
See you next time.